Well, on the docket this week, the presidential election, a trio of legal questions surrounding one Donald J. Trump. Now, the topics, they run the gamut from the presidential, or I should say potential conflicts of interest from Trump's business to questions about his charitable foundation and even about media access to his divorce papers. So let's do them one at a time. First up, a deep dive from a Newsweek piece, and if you haven't read it, you should. It's fascinating. It exposes the foreign business interests of the Trump organization. None of it allegedly illegal, by the way, but when you're talking about places like Russia, Ukraine, South Korea, and more, you're picking hotspots around the world here, and any decisions a potential President Trump would make certainly would impact those business interests.
Let's not say certainly, because I read this piece and I found it to be more of an editorial than a piece of reporting. I mean, Donald Trump, it's not at all surprising that a multinational businessman would have contacts all across the world, and he wouldn't be the first rich guy, connected rich guy to run for president, FDR being a great example.
Okay, but wait a second.
So you have
in
to
terms
divest.
of FDR, first of all, the family versus him,
Well,
in terms of
JFK.
fingerprints.
JFK.
But one second here. Trump, for example, has said South Korea ought to run its own nuclear program, but Trump has an interest in a South Korean company that, in effect, would build nuclear weapons. Nobody's going to debate that as a potential conflict of interest.
He will have to divest.
Well, this is where the problem gets into. The article also says the organization cannot be put in just a blind trust the way other elected officials
So then he won't be able to put it into a
with
blind
their
trust.
investments. And moreover, you have his kids basically with their own fingerprints on these companies. So begs the question, should we have a full disclosure of business interests be as a requirement for presidential candidates, just like many are saying ought to happen when it comes to medical records of any candidate? And another topic certainly in the headlines today. Then there's the new investigation into the Trump Foundation. I won't get into that in 1 second. But first, in terms of him, in terms of his business interests, guys, I sit here now, having not seen his records with that bogus rationale that he's under audit, okay?
Right.
I don't know what's real, what's not, if he pays any tax, if he doesn't. Certainly, he's made it clear his principal qualification for president is that he's a businessman, and he's going to do whatever he can to pay the least amount of taxes. I'm not even indicting him on this,
right,
but he's going to do whatever he can to further his business interests. I still have no idea how you can unbundle when he's got his name on everything and he would enact policy that would impact those same stated business interests, and we have no idea if in fact he would remove himself, put them in blind trusts, which are much more complicated than we make it sound. How would that work?
But you know, Rich, this is nothing new here.
No.
Every time a very connected, wealthy man runs for office and gets in office, he has these issues to deal with. And by the way, you'll say, well, this guy has directly. If the candidate himself doesn't have these issues, they're all the people that surround him, that support him financially, all his donors are all giving money to make sure that their interests are protected by that politician.
When we talked about Mitt Romney, obviously there was questions about Bain Capital. Mitt Romney was not the sole entity at Bain Capital. Okay, nor did he run. But he totally recused himself from that and made it clear that he would have no input in the decisions. And he also further laid out exactly where those business interests were. To compare the two is completely unfair.
It's not, because it's a closely held corporation. The Trump Organization doesn't have the disclosure obligations that a public company has or that a nonprofit has.
Do you think that we should have
as a politician, as a political matter, if you don't like the lack of disclosure or the secrecy, don't vote for him. There's a difference between the political optics of it.
Option that is for us.
He has, under the Ethics in Government Act, if he gets elected, he's going to be subject to the same restrictions as every other politician. There's Congress that has oversight responsibilities, and there's a press.
If elected,
people
are going to go into a booth in November, potentially, if not probably, not knowing the scope of his business interests, of his holdings, not knowing where his tax returns are or are not right now, and that's the choice we have.
Yes.
Why don't we do? Let me say it this way. Do you think we should compel legally to have an independent doctor or panel of doctors be able to give a bill of health for the candidates once they get through the primary process, A, that they have to do a full release of their tax records, we all know where they are, where they're not, and also full disclosure as to their financials? No. To me, I don't see how that possibly,
Because you're
given the predecessors have done it before.
erecting more and more barriers and disincentives to get the most
Baloney,
qualified people to
Mark.
run
But
for
Rich,
office.
There's no shortage of people who want to be president.
There's
They've
a
all
big
done
shortage.
everything I've said.
None of us at this table in our right minds would want to be president.
But
And
not
if you're
only
gonna-
that,
Speak for
Rich,
yourself.
this should be taken care of during the primary. If a person's not willing to do this, and that's what the party requires of them, to put their taxes out there, give
But it's
health
not
incentive.
required, it's just
But
political
if that's
convention.
important, and the party should put that candidate up. At
Or,
this
or
point, you're
hold it
compelling.
against them at the voting
Exactly.
booth.
But you
It's
know what?
fundamentally
It's
a
such
political
a false
question.
choice. I'll give you an idea today. He goes on Dr. Oz and he hands him a piece of paper as if that's a real record. A lot of people are going to go, oh, that must mean he's fine.
Well, then
He had
that's
some
their
guy
problem.
Who looked at him over a TV set and say, yeah, he's going to be the healthiest
If
president ever.
people believe that, or they believe Dr. Oz, who's already being yanked off the air, as far as I understand it, and that's good enough for them, they get what
Let me
they
move on to the
deserve.
next one. I can't disagree more. Then, how about the investigation into the Trump Foundation by the New York Attorney General Eric Schneider? Recent reporting has shown that Trump contributes nothing to the foundation, nada. But he collects money from other people. Mark probably kiting a check here. And what he does is he then Trump donates
I got to
it
give
in
my
his
check
own
to
name.
Mayo for his honor,
yes,
our
very good.
usual guests. I don't have the money for Trump.
Trump also has allegedly used that cash even for himself. Now, Doug did this once, but he used other people's money. He purchased a 6-foot-tall portrait of himself, and also for a Tim Tebow football helmet Trump won at a charity auction.
Doug is so huge that a 6 foot only captures
That's
half
just
of
the
it.
head.
Half of
Okay,
it.
but there's a more serious angle here as well. Schneiderman's also looking into a $25,000 contribution from the foundation to the Florida Attorney General Pam Biondi, whose office, just coincidentally, was investigating Trump University for the same reason as he was being investigated in Texas and as he was being investigated in New York. After the foundation gave the cash, coincidentally, Biondi's office dropped the case, even as the ADAs in the office all thought that there was a case to pursue. This all continues as Schneiderman continues a civil suit against Trump over Trump U. Okay, so my question here is, this stinks. You've been in ADA. Are you telling me that somebody writes a check to a boss, maybe not all of them, but to certain DAs, and magically the case doesn't choose to be investigated or prosecuted? The BS meter should go on a little bit, right?
I don't think you can link the two. I mean, what he did was legal. I mean, he didn't do anything
I
illegal.
didn't say it was illegal, but I'm
This-
questioning from,
If
how it
this
was handled.
stinks, the entire system stinks.
Well, it does, and he's
that's
the
problem.
first to tell you that it stinks, and he exploited it to his maximum advantage when he was in the private sector. And because he exploited
We're
it
not
so much, he
dismissing
knows
the
how
Trump
to change
view
it.
from everything that I know you guys know of it. We're not for a second saying that he sold these kids and also adults in life here a false bill of goods. He promoted all the things that were going to happen and never delivered on them. Listen, whatever you think, and I heard Trump call him a partisan hack, the Attorney General
He's
at
right
least
about
has a
that.
case
He's
to pursue.
100% a partisan
Here
hack.
we go.
No. I mean, I get the fact that he commenced the other investigation, before Trump. It was done in 2013. Maybe he was thinking about running at the time. The timing of this, it really has a lack of credibility, a lack of weight. It's not going to get any traction. And let's put this in perspective with Bondi. It was whether she was going to join in the action, the civil action filed by multiple attorney generals.
Which everybody
across
seemed, just by the way, in
country.
Texas, then AG Abbott also it seemed to have an indication. He also got a contribution from Trump, and in his office as well, the ADAs all said.
Let them
that they-
investigate it.
But
I
you know
think
what?
it's
the
fair.
idea,
It's
let me
fair
just say, Do
investigation.
you know anybody? Well, you guys may criminally represent them, but do you know anybody socially that would take money from other people for charitable purposes, promote it as if they're giving money, even promise to give checks, don't do it, and then buy a portrait of yourself?
Well, look,
Ick.
to suggest, well, no one's saying he's icky or not
But it's
icky.
illegal.
This is a race to the bottom, this election, and whoever can run out the
But
clock
you're making
first.
a false comparison.
They're both
of the two.
icky.
Look
They're
at the
both icky.
foundation
No,
of
they're
what the
both
Clinton
pretty icky.
Foundation does versus what the Trump was. Finally, I got this question for you.
Yeah.
There's a question as to whether or not, through a FOIA request or whatever, they can get the records of the Trump divorce. I thought those things are sealed. How can those things
They're
get
not going to be.
reopened?
They're not going to.
I don't think you can get them, and I don't understand why they want them.
The press wants them because now it's a matter of public concern. But though these agreements, and we had Ira Gar on here, and I know the lawyers who negotiated the agreements for Donald Trump. These things are ironclad and bulletproof. It's a non-starter.
Rich, okay, I know, going quick, but everything that Donald Trump is saying, whether you like him or not, everything he's saying about the press being unfair to him
100%.
Oh my
is
God.
starting to,
100%.
He's
starting
got
to
such a false.
Listen,
The standards he's held to versus everyone
not
else
true. It's not
is
true.
hysterically.
asking for his divorce paper. I mean,
Listen,
Well, they're not going to get him just because
after,
they're.
after
All right,
the
I gotta hit
convention,
something
there was
here,
an
guys.
orgy
All right.
to knock him out. It didn't work. He's rising, and now the orgy is starting
Oh,
again.
please. Okay, when we come back here, story that we focused on a great deal, the housing desegregation case, and also more specifically, the danger of depositions. Take a look at a video depo given by the Westchester County exec here in a long-running housing discrimination case and ask, why do some seem so unprepared when they're deposed, and why keep fighting a case you know you're going to lose?